Hey everybody, how's it going? First of all, thank you for attending our webinar. My name is David Muniz, and I'm a cybersecurity specialist here at Senhasegura. So we started the webinar with some housekeeping instructions. So everybody is on mute mode, and you can type your answers and questions on the Q&A box, and we will answer in the end of this webinar. These webinars, the recording of this webinar will also be sent by you, to you, and this session is also being recorded. So without further ado, let's start our webinar. So I'm David Muniz, and I work at Senhasegura since 2017. So I've been working here for 4 years, and pretty much I've been working with the documentation of the product, and I've also been involved in evaluation of the product from consulting firms like Gartner, Forrester, IDG, and Kuppinger Co. So this is our agenda today. First, we will see the cybersecurity landscape. Then we will, I will go through the importance of the privileged credentials and privileged access as well. Then we will introduce privileged access management, or PAM, and the associated challenges. And then finally, we will introduce best practices, PAM best practices according to Gartner. So now we're living in the digital transformation area. This whole process, which has been accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic, has become more than a trend. It is a business imperative for companies to remain competitive and also to be able to deliver value to their customers. And in order to be able to obtain all the advantages of cloud, IoT, and development, organizations must execute their investments in cybersecurity, also in compliance and also in identity, to mitigate business risks associated with this whole digital transformation process. And then comes up the question, how to conciliate security and innovation. The growing cyber threats, like insiders, for example, has sparked a migration movement from trust but verify models. So before we have the security perimeter that companies had, and these models, they have been shifting to zero trust based, such as, for example, Forrester's Zero Trust, Gartner's Carta, and Google's Beyond Corp. And pretty much any organization that is concerned with its business continuity deploy cybersecurity solutions to ensure the protection of its security perimeter. These solutions can be, for example, antivirus and firewalls. And therefore, some people may think that the organization would be safe just with their security team being concerning about threats outside of this perimeter. So you can see here a little castle. Imagine your organization as this little castle here. So everything that is inside this perimeter is considered safe and based on the previous module. But now this perimeter doesn't exist anymore. And defending the perimeter is no longer an effective strategy, as both insider and outsider attackers take advantage of the lack of protection in their security perimeter to abuse the privilege granted by their credentials. So it's possible for these malicious attackers to gain full access to corporate systems, such an ERP, for example, and they could, an domain admin, for example. In the case of an ERP, they could, for example, transfer money from bank accounts, or if they have access to an Active Directory, for example, or domain admin, they could do serious damage in the organization. And then, of course, they can obtain confidential information improperly. So we have some data here about cyber threats and the movement, this migration from trust but verify to zero trust movement was further intensified with the shift to the remote work models that have been introduced by the pandemic. And according to a study conducted by Forrester, more than a half, 53% of respondents said that the crisis affected the way customers did businesses with their organizations. 50% indicated that the COVID-19 pandemic caused a change in the work model to these distributed work model. And COVID also defined a new attack surface for various threat actors. 58% of the companies that have been surveyed by Forrester faced an increase in phishing attempts. Ransomware attacks also affected 29% of those surveyed. So we have more cybersecurity risks. And we also have an expansion on the number of passwords. It is estimated that the world has currently more than 300 billion passwords to protect. And the landscape is not doesn't look good because we have to protect an increased number of passwords. This number should be probably more than this today. So here we have some facts. According to a study by Verizon, 37% of cyber attacks involve stolen privileged credentials. These privileged credentials are also called keys of the kingdom because, as I've said before, it opens doors to privileged activities and critical activities in the company. And the average cost of a cyber attack that involves privileged credentials is up to $4.77 million, which is pretty much more than 30% of the average overall cost that have been $3.86 million. So we can see here that a cyber attack that involves privileged credentials, it costs a lot more than an average data breach cost. And here, in times of COVID-19, the industry with the greatest cost of a data breach is the healthcare industry. And it has been a target for malicious actors, was of course because of the criticality of the information that it gathers, but also because of COVID. And healthcare companies, the cost of a data breach in those companies can reach up to $8.6 million, which is more than double of an average overall cost. So look at this headline. I think everyone here must have heard of the cyber attacks on SolarWinds. The security incident there is estimated to have affected at least 100 American companies, including Microsoft, NVIDIA, Cisco, FireEye, and CrowdStrike, as well, not only private companies, but also government agencies. It is estimated that these cyber attack has hit at least 9 US federal agencies. And in the case of Microsoft, look at the impact. According to the American technology company, malicious agents have gained access to the source code of one of their user authentication software. So can you imagine the impact of your source code being stolen by malicious actors? What can they do with this sensitive information? And many professionals in the cybersecurity industry believe that this number may be much higher. And this is basically because many companies are not obliged to report attacks that did not involve leakage of personal data, of personal identified information. And it is estimated that there are approximately 18,000 SolarWinds customers who have received software updates with the malicious code. But the malicious actors, the hackers that are supposedly from Russia, they had specific interests in this case, which is large technology companies in the US and also government agencies. But of course, not only American companies have been affected by these cyber attacks. For the Middle East, well, the United Emirates, Arab Emirates cyber chief here in this article, he warns that the Middle East region is facing a cyber pandemic as hackers take advantage of COVID-related digital adoption. The UAE has also seen 250% almost more than a double, almost 3 times increase in cyber attacks this year, I mean, in 2020, with phishing and ransomware incidents increasing in frequency. And according to the government, the financial sector was one of the most attacked areas, industries, as well as the health sector, as I've mentioned before. And according to a report from CyberEdge, in the Middle East and Africa, in the EMEA region, ransomware attacks affected nearly 6 in 10 companies, which is 61%. That is more than in Europe, which has been 57%, and the same percentage as in Latin America. So another headline that worries us, cybercrime costs the world economy more than $1 trillion, which is pretty much 1% of global GDP, according to a McAfee research. And another interesting fact that we can bring here is that 92% of the companies felt damage other than just monetary losses. So we're not just talking about money here. Those losses include also reduced efficiency, for example, downtime, operational costs, for example, to respond to those cyber incidents, and of course, damage to reputation and image. Nowadays, more and more people have considered trust as an aspect when dealing with companies. And now in times of COVID and digital transformation and greater competition in the market, this makes total difference. In my case, for example, I always look if if I make business with a company, if they have suffered a data breach, because I know that my data would be in jeopardy as well. So if I have to choose between those two, I will probably choose a company that have not been a victim of a data breach. So another data breach. Equifax is probably one of the most worldwide known data breach. And for those who are not aware of the financial impact of a cyber attack, you have probably heard of the attack on Equifax, one of the biggest data breach that has been reported. In this case, between May and June of 2017, cyber criminals had access to around 150 million records from Equifax credit monitoring service. And the breach affected approximately 56% of the American population, not only in the US, but also in the UK. Millions of customers have been affected by this data breach in the UK as well. And in this settlement, Equifax had agreed to invest $25 million to improve security of personal data stored by the company. But look at the difference between the amount that should have been invested and the total to be paid by Equifax because of this incident. Not only of we have mentioned before, not only the compensations not only to customers, but also to financial institutions, but also the damage, the image to the damage to the image of the company. Well, probably everyone that has been following cybersecurity news are aware of Equifax, and not because of their services, but because of this data breach. So now we're facing now the privacy area. We have been seeing lots of new regulations and also sanctions, and these are a new reality, a new challenge for cybersecurity teams. So we're talking here with an international audience. So we have here people from the Middle East, we have here people from Europe, from North America. So we have all of those regulations that deals with data privacy. In the Middle East, we have Qatar, we have the United Arab Emirates. That those are some of the countries that have been implemented data privacy regulations. And then we have GDPR in Europe, which previews a sanction for maximum 4% of the revenue, or 10 million or 20 million euro. Well, the usual sanction is up to 2% and 10 million, but depending on the personal data that has been affected by the data breach, this number can be up to 4%. Then we have, now that we have seen the whole cybersecurity landscape, we're going to talk about privileged credentials. And privileged credentials are also called the keys of the kingdom. But why are privileged credentials so important? Because they provide access to critical actions, as I've mentioned before. So you can modify the domain controller settings, for example, or you can transfer funds from the organization's account. And we have seen the multiplication of this type of account in the environment. And in times of greater regulatory requirements, including new data protection legislation, such as GDPR, as we've mentioned before, ensuring the protection of those privileged credentials is more than reducing cyber risks and avoiding millionary sanctions. It is ensuring business continuity. So more than ever, cybersecurity risks are associated with business continuity, and it is important that we ensure the proper protection of the infrastructure. Then we have machine identity as well. So we have seen that privileged credentials can be both user accounts and machine and applications. And in times of automation, we have been seeing this number increasing. Gartner, for example, it estimates that that by last year we had 20 billion connected devices with privileged credentials as well. So one device can have more than one privileged credential associated, and this number is expected to grow by 20% in this year. So we'll end up, the estimation is that we'll finish 2021 with a 20% increase of those credentials that can reach up to 24 billion connected devices by the end of this year. Now everything is on the cloud. We have this new access model that we have hybrid environments. So not everything is on premises, and now we have this shifting to the cloud as well. Some companies, some large companies, global companies plan to move everything to the cloud, 100% of their infrastructure to the cloud. There's a study that says more than 50% of those global companies surveyed are shifting 100% of their infrastructure to the cloud. Well, an advantage of cloud environments is their scalability. So you can dynamically allocate resources and create machines and create all of these infrastructure assets as well. And then we have a new access model as well that have granular. So we have more privileges, more granularity in those access, and they have a dynamic access models, for example, using just-in-time provisioning. And what is PAM? And before we move on, I would like to launch a poll here to see when do you plan to implement a PAM solution? So I will launch the poll, and while I explain you what PAM is about, I just ask you to answer the question, answer the poll. Regulatory requirements such as not only data breach regulation, but PCI, ISO, SOX, and NIST, for example, they require IT administrators to review credential privileges and also to implement the principle of least privilege. And implementing the appropriate privilege access management is about protecting the keys of the kingdom that we have previously seen. And those keys, if they fall in the wrong hands, they can open improper doors or expose the castle to malicious invaders. And because of their importance and high impact, those privileged credentials are a favorite target for malicious attackers. And according to Gartner, by 2022, 70% of organizations will implement PAM practices for all of their use cases, which is an increase of 40% compared to today. So the main purpose of PAM is to prevent attacks, to protect those privileged credentials, mitigate the risks of insiders, and improve operational efficiency. Well, in this graphic, it is possible to see the evolution of privileged credentials. By 20 years ago, those privileged credentials were basically on premises. And here we're talking about admin accounts on network assets, for example, servers, hypervisors, and those privileged credentials, they had many privileges, so little granularity, and we had few users as well. And now we are, those privileged credentials evolved to cloud environments, for example, to AWS, Azure, virtual environments. And we've seen in the past few years an evolution of those privileged credentials to IoT and DevOps, for example, cameras, sensors, DevOps pipelines. They are also considered in what we call the machine and automation area. Those privileged credentials now, they have few privileges, and they have many APIs that integrates them with other solutions as well. And we have been, since we're talking about automation, we're talking about privileged task automation, for example, PTA or RPA. You've probably heard of those areas, and those credentials, they have been increased by up to 40%. And we're talking here about DevOps, about secrets management, cloud access, and also API identity. Well, Gartner has also recognized the importance of implementing the adequate privilege management. And proof of that is that they have chose PAM for 2 years in a row as the #1 project in information security. And by implementing the appropriate PAM controls, it is possible for companies to address cybersecurity needs, for example, and also to reduce those associated risks. Some of those risks, they may include, for example, lack of visibility of all the assets that are connected to the infrastructure and their respective credentials and privileges, of course, the lack of management of privileged access, and the lack of traceability of the actions carried out in the environment, which I think is very important. I believe is very important since we're talking about zero trust, which means that all the accesses, they need to be checked and verified by the companies. And those risks are directly related. As I usually say, that it is impossible to track what is not managed, and it's not possible to manage what is not known. And what about the PAM market? Well, according to Gartner, and we're still talking about studies conducted by them, by next year, by 2022, 7% of organizations will implement privileged access management practices for all of their use cases. And while today this number reaches 40%. And until that same year, until 2022, 90% of organizations will recognize that mitigating the risks associated with PAM is an essential security control instead of the 70% currently. And the last fact that I want to bring here is that 60% of organizations will have an understanding of the business benefits of PAM, as well as greater reliability and also faster responses to a dynamic IT environment, while this number is 30% today. Now that we know what PAM is, you can answer, okay, David, but how do I implement PAM in my organization? Well, the implementation of the adequate PAM involves those aspects: people, processes, and tools. Well, of those that I've introduced here, in my opinion, the most difficult to implement are processes and people. I also think that it's useless to implement the state-of-the-art in PAM technology if business processes are not well defined, and also people do not have the proper cyber awareness. In this case, addressing the technology aspect without working on the others, I mean, if you implement the tools without implementing the proper processes and also training the people that are performing those processes, it can result in greater security risks, in addition to impacts on budgets, because then we have a rework. If you implement a tool and then you have to train everybody again, you increase those operational costs as well, which can, of course, affect business continuity. Well, my recommendation in this case is to establish the process, increase cybersecurity awareness, and then acquire solutions such as senhasegura to properly manage those cybersecurity risks. And what other challenges that we see here, that according to Gartner, the discovery and management of all privileged accesses is a challenge for most organizations, to have visibility of all the access. And all of these considering that the challenges introduced by the adoption of cloud models and also development environment. And why is this important? Well, basically because privileged accounts that are not mapped and managed and properly managed can bring significant risks to organizations. And we have already seen that almost pretty much more than a third of those cyber attacks involve compromising privileged credentials. It is an important attack vector for companies of all sizes. We're not talking just about big companies and global companies. We're talking here about small and medium companies as well. Few organizations are able to implement the principle of least privileges. And I usually say that this is something that organizations should really be concerned about, because, well, implementing the, if companies are not able to implement the principle of the least privilege, this increases the attack surface and also leaves the organization exposed to risks through excessive, for example, or inappropriate privileges. And these privileges, they need to be constantly assessed. So whenever an employee leaves the company, whenever an employee changes their area, those privileges and access, they need to be constantly reviewed. And it is important to automate all of these processes as well. Well, then we have here a diagram that shows how a PAM tool works. And the problem here is that the lack of control over those privileged credentials prevents governance in information security. And here, the solution here is to properly manage all privileged credentials by creating here an authentication, authorization, and also a governance process for your users in your organizations. And here we have, well, senhasegura here in this case, it can act as a password vault. So the user can just see the password and the solution will deliver the password to the user. And then the user can have direct access to a series of assets, such as cloud, social media, for example, servers, network assets, applications, and databases. Or if you use advanced PAM use cases, you can perform a remote session through senhasegura's proxy. That creates a greater layer of governance, because now you have traceability of all the actions that are performed in the environment. And senhasegura also offers user behavior, threat analysis, and traceability that can, of course, send alerts to your, through CM and syslog, to your SOC team as well. Well, now talking about the 4 pillars of PAM that has been conceived by Gartner. We're talking about here track and secure, govern and control, record and audit, and also operationalize. And we'll further explain all the best practices that are associated with these 4 pillars of PAM. And from this concept, it's possible to implement PAM controls through specific tools, such as senhasegura here. Well, the first of those best practices is to establish processes and procedures to address PAM risks. And here we're talking about policies, processes, and procedures as well. And those responsible for information security, they must be able to define the company's cyber risk appetite, and in addition to tools, roles, and responsibilities. The second best practice here is to acquire and install tools to implement those processes using the 4 pillars of PAM that we have described before. And here we're talking about SSH keys, DevOps containers, digital certificates, and privileged credentials, and usual privileged credentials as well from assets. I usually say the next best practice is to create processes to identify all privileged accounts and owners in your IT infrastructure. And I usually say, as I've said before, it's impossible to track what is not managed. And it is not possible to manage what is not known. And the models that have been adopted by organizations must involve the continuous discovery of privileged credentials. And like this, running a scan, for example, in the environment just once may not be enough to ensure that new credentials are properly managed in those environments. And this is basically because, well, we've seen that those environments are dynamic now, and those credentials are dynamically created and provisioned and deprovisioned as well. So today you can have, I don't know, 1,000 privileged credentials in your environment. And let's say that you are a business, e-commerce portal, for example, and then you have Christmas time. You probably have to adapt your infrastructure to the increasing demand of your customer in your website, in your e-commerce platform. So it is important to identify all the privilege counts in their owners as well. The next best practice is a balance, is to apply the principle of least privilege by granting only the minimum level of privilege for the time required to carry out a task, which means that you are limiting the, you're reducing the attack surface, because the malicious actor will not have the indefinite window to act in your environment. And this brings a balance between security and productivity. Well, I usually say that whenever you increase security, you reduce productivity in your environment. So let's say that you have a solution or an ERP or your domain admin, and then you set up a high security controls. You probably reduce the productivity of your team. If you put, for example, MFA for all the users to be performed before the accesses, or every time that the user performed a critical activity, you reduce their productivity, because those controls, they need to be performed by the users every time they do an action in your environment. On the other hand, if you decrease security, if you want to increase productivity, you probably have to put less security controls. So the challenge here is to find a perfect balance between those two. The next best practice is to implement privileged access login and auditing capabilities. And as we have already mentioned, those serious trust security paradigm involves the elimination of the security perimeter. And since we have eliminated this perimeter, all the actions and changes in privileged accounts in the environment must be continuously verified. And then we have those features that are offered by PAM solutions like senhasegura. We have first threat analysis features that must be able, for example, to perform command auditing, alerting, blocking of commands. The solution, senhasegura, can also mark a command score. So you can set up a, for example, if you have a specific command for SSH, you can define a score for this command, and every time a user executes these commands, you can set up a specific action. You can, for example, block the command. You can alert your security team. So senhasegura can offers different kinds of approach depending on your risk posture as well. And we have a user behavior analysis that identifies suspicious accesses or any queries that are executed by the users, and they use criteria, and it uses criteria such, for example, as access number of accesses, unusual access time, for example. So let's say that your admin only runs a specific task in the morning, and today they have executed in the afternoon. So the solution recognized this as a risky command, and of course you can set up specific actions to be performed by the PAM solutions, and our origin as well. So let's say that your team always work from the Middle East, or always work for a specific region in the world, and this new access comes from a different region. So the solution can also do the same actions that we've mentioned before. And last but not least, we have our exclusive information dashboard. Senhasegura offers a visual dashboard that you can set up for your SOC team in your SOC room, for example, and it shows a graphic a representation of all the accesses that are being performed in your environment. The next best practice is to create and expand automation for privileged access activities. So automation here includes increased trust and security by, by removing the human aspect. And this allows these tasks to be assigned, for example, to less experienced staff. So you don't have to have a more senior employee performing those tasks, because senhasegura can automate and also reduce the associated risks with someone performing those tasks, and which also eliminates the need to review those activities, which increases efficiency and this decreases operating costs. And now, on the other hand, integration, it includes applications such as security platforms, such as, for example, vulnerability management or orchestration, your identity management for privileged credentials, lifecycle management, and also ITSM, which is service management, for example. You can integrate your PAM tool with your service desk solution, and also your CMD, your change management for just-in-time accesses as well. And last, we have CM and syslog tools as well to alert and to bring data for your admins. Well, senhasegura also offers advanced PAM features that have been mentioned by Gartner in there as a best practice. senhasegura is able to automatically discover all the assets in your environment, and we have open connectors that allows even legacy infrastructure to be discovered and managed by the solution. senhasegura also integrates with your DevOps pipeline, bringing total governance over privileged credentials and secrets in your environment. Machine and application identity. So senhasegura is also able to manage SSH keys and digital certificates. And we provide, senhasegura is able also to provide just-in-time privileged access for your infrastructure. Well, in summary, this is pretty much what I had today. Well, PAM is crucial to assure cybersecurity and is becoming increasingly important. And our advice here is to choose a complete and simple deployed platform to address further future needs without user friction. And senhasegura is a full stack PAM solution that doesn't require any additional licensing to work. So you don't have to worry about database. You don't have to worry about operational systems. And PAM is becoming even more and more important in those times, where we have a complex infrastructure, where you have the multiplication of privileged credentials. So it's pretty much impossible to manage those privileged access risks without PAM solutions like senhasegura. And just a final poll before we finish the webinar. I want to know how many of those practices, or the percentage of those practices that you've been implementing in your company. So what is the percentage of those practices that I have introduced here do you use in your organizations? And I'll leave you a few seconds to answer this poll before we finish. And if you want to know more about Senha Segura, you can request a demo from our team. Just go to our website, and one of our sales team will get in touch with you to perform a POC for Senha Segura. Well, that's pretty much what I had here today. We're now open for questions from your side. I have here a first questions. How Senha Segura can be deployed? Well, Senha Segura can be deployed on premises. So Senha Segura works with a virtual machine that can be deployed in your environment, and the tool can also be delivered as with our exclusive and unique PAM security appliance. So we have a partnership with Dell, and we offer a customized enhanced Dell server ready for Senha Segura. And Senha Segura can also be delivered as a service. So you can have a subscription, and it can be deployed both on public and private clouds as well. Hope this answers your question. So our next question here is, what kind of controls do you offer for social networking sites? Well, Senha Segura can both manage the password, so you can view the password of a social media, which is a simple use case. But Senha Segura also can, you can perform a web session to Facebook, for example. So and you can configure the login and everything, and Senha Segura delivers you a session that is being recorded and can be audited for malicious activities as well. So and it can be on Twitter, on Facebook, on any web-based site as well that requires authentication. And Senha Segura also offers templates, so you can configure easily configure for other sites as well. So pretty much virtually any website that requires authentication can be managed by Senha Segura. And not only social networking, Senha Segura is also able to manage console management for CSPs, for example, for AWS, for Google, for GCP, for Azure as well, and for social networking for SAP as well. So lots of websites, pretty much virtually any website can be managed by Senha Segura. Another question here, for discovery, do you need to install agents or on Activity Directory or network? And what about discovery on cloud? Well, Senha Segura does not require any agent. I forgot to mention that Senha Segura is agentless. So with our open connectors, Senha Segura is able to discover assets and credentials as well. So it is not required. And Senha Segura, we also have open templates, which means that if pretty much any device in your network can be managed by the solution. And our knowledge base, it contains lots of those connectors, and it can also be developed by the customer as well. About discovery on the cloud, we can also discover secrets on GCP. We have our exclusive cloud IAM that provides management for creating secrets in all of those environments. So we have a specific client that they had to manage secrets in AWS and GCP, and they have a specific team that that needed to be contacted to create and destroy those accesses. And we were able to reduce the time from 1 day to several hours, because now the developers, they can themselves provision, and they provision those secrets in those environments as well. And through the and it can pass through the whole workflow process as well. So you can have an approver, and we offer 3-level approval in those environments. Hopefully I answered your questions. And well, I don't have another final question here. Could you give a brief on the licensing policy? Not sure if this is right for this question. Well, our licensing policy is based on users, and also on nodes. So we have simplified our licensing process. So it's basically it is based on the number of users the users of assets that are the users that that you have in your environment as well. So it is basically based on this paradigm, and also on nodes. For example, if you have high availability, if you have more than one node, then we price them separately as well. And we also price obligation and development environment as well. So you can have your development environment for a reduced license as well. Okay, so I guess we don't have more questions here. Well, I'd like to thank everybody who have participated in this webinar. And if you need any more information from our side, you can, of course, reach me on my email that I would just put here on the screen, and I'll be glad to give you more information about senhasegura. Okay, you probably received a copy of those slides in the next few days with a recording of this webinar as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending the webinar, and see you next time. Bye-bye.